Hello everybody, PwngoreStormfiend here, and as I mentioned in the Xerath video, I wanted to sit down and just talk about the Skarner changes, and the reason behind that is that I don't really understand what Riot's trying to accomplish with them. Uh, Apparently they're claiming they're trying to push him to be more viable, but all the changes really did was hurt some of the things that actually made him okay. So, for those of you unaware, the changes to Skarner are as follows. His Q, which is Crystal Slash, it does damage in an area around him. It used to apply a slow on consecutive hits. So you'd hit them once, and then if you hit them again, they'd be slowed, and from that point on, you could continually slow them. Instead, it gives him an attack speed boost. Now, the attack speed boost is really good, and it would be great, except that they changed something else that already gave him attack speed and removed it. Which brings us on to his W, which is Crystalline Exoskeleton. What the Exoskeleton does is it puts a shield on Skarner, and then it provides a movement speed buff for him. This is the new shield. The new Exoskeleton gives him a move speed buff, and the move speed buff ramps up over I think it's over 3 seconds. It's over a duration anyways. And if the shield breaks, he loses it though. The old Crystalline Exoskeleton used to do the same, except that it gave you both attack speed and movement speed, and there wasn't a ramp up time. You got it all up front. They also changed the cooldown slightly, which sucks. And yeah, so they basically shifted the movements or the attack speed from his shield to his Q. I mean, it's better on his Q. Don't get me wrong; like it gives him more attack speed. But then they removed the slow, which was really, really good. It made Skarner at least somewhat decent. Here's where it gets worse. His E. His E is a skill shot that does very mediocre damage. And it used to apply a mark on the target that, when triggered, would heal Skarner. Only worked once. The skill shot hits everything, which... But the problem is they slapped the slow on it. And as a Skarner player, I used to play Skarner a lot in Season 2, I never picked up my E until I was basically made to pick it up. Like, it's not a good ability. And now they slap the slow on it, saying, you have to take your E. But they also made the projectile worse. They made the projectile smaller, and they made the travel time slower. This really puts Skarner in an awkward position where it's harder for him to gank pre-6. He can do it, it's just not as strong as it was, which I don't think it was strong, like ridiculously strong before. Then we move on to our ultimate. The ultimate change, I understand why they did it to an extent, but I also don't like it. They made it so his R will now root you before it grabs you. And my guess would be the reasoning behind this in particular is that you used to, like, if you would flash at the same time he ulted you, he would still grab you and you'd waste your flash. Or, if you used other dash abilities and such. I understand why they don't like that, but personally, I think that's a good thing that it did that. Because it made players actually have to think about how they were going to react. It's like, well, do I want to ever let him get in close range to grab me? Do I want to, as soon as I see him try to go in, do I want to back out? Or do I want to save my escape until he already grabs me and the duration runs off? I feel like it just dumbed it down a bit, which, I can live with that change. I can live with it. It's the other stuff that really I don't get at all. It doesn't really solve any of his issues. Something they were claiming too on a forum post was, we didn't like if Skarner got ahead, he felt impossible to deal with. I don't see that as a good argument, because what champion isn't really, like, what beefy champion is not hard to deal with if they get ahead? If Mundo gets ahead, you can't do anything. If Olaf gets ahead, you can't do anything. If Jax gets ahead, you can't do anything. So the argument, we don't want to feel like he's impossible to deal with once he gets ahead, just doesn't sell it for me, because that's pretty much any beefy champion. It is really hard to put down a beefy champion if they get really far ahead. But in the case of Skarner versus like Mundo or Olaf or Jax, we'll just use those as examples. Or Vi. Vi is a good example. Skarner doesn't bring the damage they bring. He brings survivability, but even then, his survivability, honestly, compared to the rest of those champions, is at best. And he doesn't bring the damage they bring either. Except with the case of Mundo, although I think Mundo still does more damage when you factor in the fact that cleavers do percent health. So it's like, if you're gonna do this change to Skarner, a champion that's already pretty undesirable, why aren't you touching these other ones first? Honestly, they need to rework some parts of his kit and give him more of a clear direction. Because the problem is right now, Skarner, there's no encouragement to really build attack damage or AP. There's no encouragement to go any sort of offensive. It's, build like your Trinity Force or your Frozen Gauntlet and then just go tank. I mean, at least if you look at other Bruiser-esque characters, like Wukong or, say, Vi, they got encouragement to build a few offensive items while also going defensive. Or if you want to look at Skarner more as a tank, then it's like, well, look at a Mumu or Mundo, they still build a few offensive items. I mean, pretty much the only thing Skarner will build is like Frozen Gauntlet and then straight tank. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily hate that. It's just with these changes, it's just really silly. These changes just don't make sense. They don't solve any of his issues. They just create more. Like, before, it would be a hard sell to tell me, hey, pick up Skarner, play him this game, when I could play someone like Warwick or Vi. Now it's like, I would never touch Skarner. There's no point. His slow early game is really unreliable. And, I mean, if I'm going to play get to 6 to gank, why don't I just play someone who's really strong at 6 for ganking, like, again, Vi or Warwick. Hell, even Nocturne. At least their ganks are going to be stronger because they actually bring damage to the table. And maybe, you could argue I'm ignoring the fact that Impale lets you pull an enemy, but it's not that great. I mean, you aren't going to get them very far. It's not going to be any better or worse than Warwick Suppress, really. Or, I guess you can say it's better than Vi's, only because Vi's has the potential they could flash under a tower and drag you with them, but... So yeah, I think if you want to make Skarner viable, you first off need to undo these changes. I would look at changing his E. His E seems to be the biggest problem for his kit, because it feels really out of place. What you could do is maybe make the E a ability that gives you extra damage, perhaps? Similar to, say, like, what's the ability I'm looking for here? Something that marks the target with like a damage amplifier, like how Leona's passive puts a mark on the target, and if they're struck, it triggers the mark. I mean, it's not amazing, but it's something. But I would definitely say you need to slap the slow back on his Q. Like, honestly, if the slow's not on the Q, there's just no reason to ever pick him up. Like, he's just not good. Anyways, I just wanted to share my thoughts on these Skarner changes, which really don't make sense to me. I hope you gain at least some insight onto why I think these are kind of silly. And post in the comments what your thoughts are on the Skarner changes. Anyways, I will see you all next time. See ya.